Have Europe's environmental policies made people go hungry in Africa? In the words of the Ghanaian scholar Dr. Ernest Nkansa Dwamena,
what we have been seeing in recent years is that land is being diverted from growing food for the poor to growing food for the rich.
How did this scenario happen? To answer that question, we need to take a look at a change in Europe's environmental policies from 2009. In 2009, the European Union passed an agreement known as RED, in which it set out its renewable energy commitments for the next decade. One of the chapters of this agreement required all EU member states to ensure that 10% of their transport fuel comes from biofuels by 2020. Europe has been relatively successful in implementing this agreement, as the percentage of transportation energy coming from biofuels more than doubled between 2008 and 2019. But according to the EU's own data, more than half of the biofuel consumed in Europe is imported, with much of it coming from Africa. The EU's renewable energy commitments have therefore caused a land rush in Africa for land that can grow biofuel crops. This has often taken the form of large-scale commercial land deals involving multinational companies, governments, or private individuals. In many cases, these land deals actually fall more in the category of land grabs.
Basically, land grabbing is the unlawful seizure of land without people's consent.
Africa has been the main target of land grabbing in the past decade, with 135 million hectares leased in 2016 alone, more than the rest of the world combined. The World Bank argues that these land deals improve food security by improving technology, innovation, and productivity. The reality on the ground paints a very different picture. Rather than the land being used to grow food with improved technology, land is primarily used to grow biofuel crops, and most of what is grown is in fact exported. It is clear that the EU's RED agreement has led to large areas of land in Africa being geared towards biofuels and exports, so the question remains, what have been the consequences?
One of the biggest consequences of it is that smallholder farmers lose access to sustain themselves because of the land that's being grabbed is from small-scale farmers. And one of the biggest things also is that it disrupts the food system because 70% of the food that we eat actually comes from smallholder farmers and peasants. And then when we zoom into biofuels itself, biofuels are actually monocrops, so sugar or palm oil. And when we look at it is that in monocropping, this leads to soil degradation.
While many have reported on the negative repercussions, one of the most serious ones has been the effect on food security. In fact, FAO data shows that Africa is the only continent in which food security has worsened since 2010. So to summarize, the 10% biofuel requirement in Europe's RED agreement led to a massive land rush for land in Africa, which was the main target of land grabs. 2/3 of the land involved in the land deals was used to grow biofuels and was geared towards exports rather than domestic consumption. As a result, more people have gone hungry on the African continent. While this may all seem pretty grim, there have been some cases of successful resistance.
Community members from Mozambique presented a case against a big project called Pro Savannah, and this was a partnership between the Japanese government, Brazilian government, and the Mozambican government. And the project was supposed to start in 2012, and this is when smallholder farmers only heard that that was going to happen, and they were going to sort of wipe out a huge amount of land in Mozambique to plant monocrops like soya beans. And the community members of smallholder farmers have been resisting and have amplified their struggles, and thus today it still hasn't necessarily taken place.
We can only hope that these kinds of examples of resistance become more frequent and that the EU takes another look at a policy that may have been well-intentioned but has clearly had disastrous consequences. Thank you for watching Sankara Media, and stay tuned for our weekly short docs on topics of global social justice.